today we have Adrian, and he's an author, and he's going to talk to you about his experiences in marketing. And then we also have Ben Cameron, who is a publisher, and he's going to talk about it from that half of the world as well. So I'll let you go, guys. Enjoy, and if anyone comes in, I'll sneak them in at the back for you.
Hello, everybody. So I am Ben Cameron. I'm from Cameron Publicity and Marketing. I'm a publicist, is what we're saying, rather than a publisher. So I am about getting attention for books through the media and through marketing. I'm going to talk mainly about publicity in terms of the media, how to get that attention. I might touch on some other marketing things, but I think Abe's going to talk mostly about marketing, price promotions, and how to get your book seen through Amazon, that sort of thing. So my main focus will be on publicity. Can you hear me in the back okay? Yeah? At Cameron Publicity and Marketing, we run publicity campaigns for publishers and for independent authors. And in addition to publicity campaigns, which are big campaigns that can last a month or more, we also do various ad hoc activities. We can write a press release for you. We can list your book on NetGalley. We have a social media introductory service, that sort of thing. But enough of the sales stuff. I'm going to tell you how you can do some or all of the publicity yourself. What you need to keep in mind is that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a great deal of sort of salesmanship. So you need to be able to talk about your book. You need to be able to phone people up and have a go at talking about your book to them and selling your book. And remember, you're not really selling your book as such. You're selling ideas. So you're selling things that a journalist might write about, that might interest them, that they might think interest their readers. So it's always worth keeping in mind. Put your mindset into that of the journalist, when you're talking to them. So what you need to do is create a media pitch, and then make that pitch to the right people. So the first thing you need to do is research your media. So by the media, I mean television. And for authors, television mainly means breakfast television shows, national shows, or local television shows. And we get people on both of those. There is radio, so it could be national radio shows, things like Woman's Hour, for example. If you have a book that is aimed well for that audience, or it could be local radio, and that's not just local radio in your area, but there are about 40 or so local BBC radio stations throughout the country, and most of them, will feature an author, even if they're not from that area, or you might have a sort of tentative link to other areas, and that helps as well. So do keep in mind that local isn't necessarily just your local, but it could be anywhere. Also radio, keep in mind podcasts. A lot of podcasts are radio shows that have been made available to be downloaded, but a lot of them are also shows that are made specifically for podcasts. So for example, next week I'll be pitching a book on politics to the Guardian Media podcast, which is a sole podcast that isn't broadcast anywhere else. Magazines, whatever your subject matter is, this is the case whether you're writing a novel or a nonfiction book, whatever the subject matter is, there's going to be magazines out there that cater for that. And it could be a subject matter like skiing or gardening or photography, or it could be more about your audience, women's magazines, for example. So magazines are very important. It is worth keeping in mind that a lot of magazines work very far in advance, particularly the glossy monthly magazines. Their editorial schedule, they're working 5-6 months in advance. So if you have a book that's published now, they probably won't consider it for a review or a feature, because they're really looking at books that are published 6 months from now. So you need to approach them way in advance in order to be able to reach them. But other magazines, weekly magazines, for example, can work much more quickly. And also that sort of advance time lag is mattering less and less all the time as websites for magazines can work much more quickly and can turn things around quickly as well. Newspapers, obviously you got your national newspapers, and they each have their own emphasis, whether it's the Guardian or the Telegraph, you know where they're coming from. And through the mid-markets like the Daily Mail and the tabloids. So do keep in mind who your audience is, and you want to pitch your book to the newspapers that are appropriate for your audience. And local newspapers as well, obviously get them on side. You always want to talk to your local papers, your free papers, as well as your bigger local papers. And keep in mind that small things can turn into big things. So you might get a story in a local paper that might get picked up by a larger paper, and things can snowball that way. It happens all the time. Journals, organizations, newsletters. If you have a subject that there are organizations for, say dyslexia, maybe one of your characters in your novel is dyslexic, be sure to let organizations know about that. And to target them appropriately. Make sure you get them copies of the book. Make sure you let them know what you're up to. Try to encourage them to review or mention your book. So whatever the subject is, there might well be organizations or journals out there that might be interested. And then online media. It could be websites for traditional media. So that's the website for the Guardian, the website for the Times. Or it could be websites that are, distinct and made, and are only on the web. So keep all those in mind. And with any of these, there are basically two kinds of coverage you can get. So there's news, and you know what news is, things that are happening now, things that are covered in the front of the newspaper. And if you have a subject matter that is about something that's covered in the news now, you can get in that way, or comment on the news in some way. Use your expertise. And then there's features. Features are things like interviews, reviews, pretty much everything else. Sidebars in newspapers and magazines with hints and tips are features. It's something that that's a really good, not too difficult thing to get, especially if you have a nonfiction book. That's more of a how-to book. That's a really good way to get publicity. So, for example, we have an author that we work with quite a lot named Carol Wire, and she writes about growing older and keeping your sense of humor as you grow older, and so growing older disgracefully, as it were, having fun. She was on BBC Breakfast last year, talking about her book about menopause. It was kind of a jokey, fun book about menopause, which is very much needed because it's a subject people don't talk about, and she was willing to get out there and talk about it. So she was on BBC Breakfast, which went really well. That was a feature article. She was on the sofa on the couch with them and talking about it and having fun. A couple weeks ago, there was an organization that released a information packet for people who reach the age of 50 and over. So things that you can do when you're older, it contains some sensible stuff like, about pensions and things like that. And then some of it was a bit silly, what they had in there, made people feel old. So it was a little bit controversial. But BBC Breakfast, because they know Carol, had her on talking about her previous book, and they know that she specializes in that sort of over 50s, had her on as well to talk about it. So that was a news item that came as a result of the previous feature item. So always keep these things in mind. And social media, of course, you got your Twitter, your Facebook, and other sites. When you're starting out, you really want to focus on Facebook and Twitter, and then as you move on, Goodreads is quite important as well. But then Other sites like Pinterest, if you have a book that has a lot of photographs in it, for example, Pinterest might be for you. LinkedIn for business ebooks. Depends on your emphasis, really. But Facebook and Twitter are the ones that you really have to do. Keep in mind that you should do them yourself. Don't get anybody else to do it, but people can advise you on how to do it properly. Teach you, get you set up, get your images right on your site for you, and then get you started. But it needs to, your tweets and your Facebook posts pretty much need to come from you, because people know the authenticity and will get to know you, and that interaction with the real you is important. The other thing to keep in mind about social media is that what it does best is amplify what you're doing elsewhere. So if you have a radio interview, you can post that radio interview on Twitter. So post a link to, say, on iPlayer, and then you can tell all your Twitter followers that you had this interview, and they have the opportunity to go and listen to it. So not only do you reach the audience that listened to the radio interview in the first place, but you can also reach your Twitter audience as well. So I said before, think like a journalist, and that's really the key. So, look at a newspaper or a magazine, see who the people are that are writing about your subject area, and you can do this very easily online, just by looking up the articles that are in your line of work, and then finding noticing who wrote those articles, targeting those people, and then make sure you tone your message for them, so that it's something that will appeal to those specific journalists. Your book might have a number of different subject areas. So it could be a romance novel with skiing, and it might be that skiing is one of your subject areas, romance is another subject area. So you want to target those, but in very different ways, obviously. Keep in mind the media bias of the particular media that you're talking to. All media have a bias of some sort, whether it's left or right politically, or whether it's bias in terms of they like to do articles that are counterintuitive in some way, or they like to do something particularly intellectual, or maybe they don't like to do intellectual things. So keep in mind what the media that you're looking at is after. Also remember that journalists are busy these days. They rarely get out. They don't get out as much as they used to. They rarely come to launch parties. They'll rarely come out to interview you. If you do an interview, you probably have to go to them. Their workload is intense these days. There are fewer of them trying to do the same amount of work, and they're up against it. So, be succinct when you talk to them. Make sure you get right to the point. Tell them why they need to cover you quickly, easily, and then get out. I usually send them an email with all the information, have a sort of a pitch in the email, attach a press release so they've got the basic information, and then follow it up with a phone call, a day or two later, to make sure they get it and make sure they get a personal pitch from me. But it's important to get all that information to them in a way that they can go back to then and review it when they get to it. So when you talk to them on the phone, it might not be the best time to talk to them, but at least you get that pitch in, and then they, after you get off the phone, after they finish what they were doing when you called, then they can go back and look at your email. So when you look at your book and you want to get attention for your book, you really need to break down your pitch, break down what it is that you think people might want to cover. So as I said before, you might have different subject areas, and you might want to do separate sorts of pitches for those separate subject areas. Children's books, for example, are a great one, because you might have a pitch that you're going to do to media that is read by teenagers or younger children, and also media that is read by parents. You've got two very different messages that you want to get to the parents and to the children. But most books have those sorts of aspects to them. Um, and what is unique about your book? Obviously, what is your unique selling point? And it doesn't, it could be something slightly off kilter. For example, we were working with an author named Safiya Shah, and she had a very beautiful sort of children's picture book. But in the picture book, she included odd words, which she called endangered words. So words that you don't see very often, that she really wanted to pick up on, and she listed out for me about 20 words, including the ones that she used in her book, but some additional ones as well. And we sent out press releases about these endangered words, an author urging other authors to use endangered words to keep them in our lexicon. It was covered by all the national papers. It was in the Daily Mail, it was in the Times, it was in the Guardian. It got mentioned on Have I Got News for You? So, that sort of thing. It's something aside from her actual book, but it got attention, and the book got named in all of that coverage. And special dates and occasions. If there's something in your book that there's an anniversary that's coming up, obviously we've just had the World War I anniversary, which has spawned a lot of books and a lot of attention. But last year I had an author who came into my office. He was 89 years old. He had traveled up from Devon, and obviously quite difficult for him to do. And he had a book that he had published back in the 50s. All I knew is that he had this book that he published back in the 50s. It was a bestseller back then. It was some sort of a war novel. And he was doing a new edition of it. His publishers didn't want to publish it again because people don't read war novels anymore, as they said. But he wanted to do something with it. Well, he came in and he explained it to me. The book sold millions of copies. It's called The Dead, the Dying, and the Damned. It was a Korean War novel. And at the time, people don't remember it now, but at the time, it was compared to The Naked and the Dead and All Quiet on the Western Front. It was the Korean War novel. And he very passionately told me it wasn't about the book. It was about the Korean War and getting people to remember the Korean War, the forgotten war. So we did this campaign, which is based around the book of him bringing his book back, but actually the campaign was about talking about the Korean War. Again, which nobody, the journalists I talked to, had barely thought of doing. And we got a lot of coverage, about both the book and the Korean War, and put that into people's minds. That was in the middle of last year. So anniversaries are another good thing to pick up on. And they can be fun anniversaries as well. I mean, there's things like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or Father's Day. And there are some very obscure ones. There's National Mole Week coming up. And I'm working on a book about a mole. So, you use what you got. And obviously keep an eye on the news. We're working on a book on politics. We're just about to start a campaign for a book on politics. We're starting it now because it's coming up to the political conferences, which are starting in a couple of weeks. So everybody's going to be talking about politics. So this is the time to do politics. We've got another book by an author who was captured and taken hostage in Iran back in 2005. She was yachting. She was with her husband on a boat. They got a little bit too close to an island that was controlled by Iran. Gunboats came and took her, and she was hostage for 2 weeks before the British government managed to get her released, or her husband released. So that'll get coverage because she's just written this book and she hasn't really talked about it much before. But also we're watching the news to see, any news that comes up about Iran, we can get in there and she can talk about it, as somebody who's been there, who's been on the receiving end of that regime, as it were. And it's not just about your book as well, it's also about you. As an author, you need to use everything you got. And that might not even have anything to do with the book. What's your experience? If you've written a memoir, it's obvious that your book is about you. It's your experience. but in a lot of ways, it might be something completely different. Last year we worked on a novel by somebody who used to be, back in the 80s, a video director. He directed the video for Sweet Dreams, Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams, which everybody knows, iconic video. It has nothing to do with what he's doing now. He wants to write, that's his career now. But because he did this way back when, we managed to get a lot of attention for him. Again, nothing to do with what he's doing now, or his book. Use your personal contacts. A lot of people have those, people that, who they knew back in school who've, gone on to become a journalist or something like that. A lot of people have those people in the past, and, can be a little bit embarrassing to approach them. But now is the time when you have your book, your book's about to publish. This is the time to call in all those favors that people owe you. Get in touch with all those old people, even if they know why you're doing it and you just want publicity for your book. Use it, because this is your only shot. Your book is only new once, so you need to do everything you can when it's new. So how do you actually pitch to the media? Well, first you need to make a press release. That press release needs to be on one page. I usually put a book cover on the press release, as long as the book cover looks good. Have bullet points. I usually have 3 or 4 or 5 very succinct bullet points about why the media in general would want to cover that book. I'll put very specific things into my pitch email that I send to them, or when I talk to them on the phone. So that the press release needs to be a little bit general. It needs to cover all the bases, all the different areas that you want to attack. But some bullet points, very short description of the book, the sort of thing that you'd have on the back cover of your book, about that much description of the plot or what the book is about. And then basic information, when it's published, how much it is, where it's available. But keep it as short and sweet and salesy as you possibly can. And like I said, I will email a press release along with a personal pitch to the journalist, follow it up a couple days later. And like I said, it takes salesmanship. You need to be able to sell it. You need to practice before you even do it. Consider it like you're selling something else. And even step back from your book. Try not to get too personal about it. Step back from your book. Think about, what does this book have to offer? If I wasn't the person who wrote it, why would I be interested in it? And then use those things to sell it. Follow up. Keep following people up. Be persistent. Make sure you phone them. A lot of people send out a lot of emails and don't ever actually phone anybody. Getting somebody on the phone is so much more powerful than sending an email, which can just easily be ignored. If they don't want to cover you and they say that they don't want to, be polite. Accept it, even if it's a little reluctant. But if you've said everything that you have to say, they don't want to do it. Move on. You've got other fish to fry. And there could be any number of reasons why somebody might not want to cover your book. It might be that they've just done something similar. It might be that they think the time has passed for that. It could be any number of reasons. Maybe there was somebody who was interested in that sort of subject area who's just left the company or something like that. Maybe they're changing the emphasis, so they're a magazine. So keep all that in mind. Don't take any of it personally, and use your social media to turn anything that you get to broadcast it to a wider audience. And make sure you contact people, and when they're interested, keep contacting them until they either say yes or no. Just to emphasize a couple points, social media, as I said before, broadcast what you get in other media. Build small placements into large ones, build those local publicity things. Let larger people know that it's been covered, in those, as long as you do it quickly, before anybody else has had a chance to cover it. Let them know that other people have been interested. Add any quotes that you get to Amazon, your Amazon page, Goodreads, etc. If you are with a publisher that has a sales team, then obviously that sales team needs to know what coverage is coming up as soon as you know. So, a big interview coming up in, The Guardian in a couple of weeks. The sales people need to get on that and be telling the bookshops about it, because hopefully you'll have people coming into the shops to order it. Or they at least need to make sure that on Amazon, is showing as available 24-hour, turnaround or whatever. So everything needs to be ready for those reviews when they come. And finally, don't take bad reviews personally. They happen. I mean, every book isn't going to appeal to every person. No matter who you are and what you do, and any novels that we consider classics today, had bad reviews back when they were first published. So don't take them personally. Just move on. Don't be tempted to reply in any way. That never ends well. And don't obsess about it. Just keep in mind that it's something that happened. Keep going. If you get consistent points coming up in reviews, consistent negative points, well, that's something you need to keep in mind for your next book. But that's all. It's just something you need to keep in mind next time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I just wanted to share a little bit of my own experience in marketing, what I've been doing with my own work, really. I first released my first novel back in June of 2012, and I didn't really know what to do in terms of marketing. I didn't really have the finances to put anything into it at the time. And it began to occur to me later on that if I was going to be taken seriously as an author, I needed to start investing not just time but money as well. I've not got an infinite source of funds to market my novels, so obviously I've had to try and be quite strategic in how I go about this. One of the things I found, I've actually done a NetGalley listing with Ben, who sort of helped me, hopefully that'll help generate some additional reviews and things. Whether reviews help generate additional sales, it's hard to say, but it's the sort of thing that doesn't hurt to give a try and just sort of measure it and see how it goes. I've got adverts with BTSE mags and things like that Ben was saying about, magazines have got 5 or 6 months lead time. We've got digital magazines online now that people do read that specialise in novels and things like that. You can actually buy advertising space with them, which is very reasonably priced. So I've got a advert for my book running with them in November, again just to see how it goes. Something I've seen a few times on LinkedIn that I'm a little bit wary of, that I've decided to give a go and see how it goes, is you sometimes see people advertising Twitter sort of advertising. They'll post so many tweets a day, etc., for a certain length of time for a certain fee. Whether it'll work or not, again, I don't know. But one thing I do know is you obviously want to direct people towards Amazon. If you're trying to sell your book to the maximum number of people, you want to be on Kindle and you want to try and target the American audience as much as possible. So you want to direct people towards Amazon to buy your book, because the more people that buy it, the more it'll push you up the charts, the more sales you'll then generate in turn. So when you do a marketing strategy, I think what you really want to do is come from as many different directions as possible at the same time to try and maximise the impact, because the further you can push it up the chart, the better. And I think the only disadvantage I've got with my book at the moment is I've just done a new cover, a new edition, but it is a book that has now been out for a couple of years, so it's not as fresh. But it'll be interesting to see, for me, what this helps generate in terms of additional sales to try on my next book, to push that up a little bit, because obviously when that releases, that'll be fresh. I've done giveaways and promotional prices and things. I actually did my book free for a little while, and I think I shifted over 1,000 copies. And admittedly, I didn't get any revenue from that, but that's 1,000 people out there that are now reading my material, and that's a potential audience for my next novel. So that's the kind of thing, again, when you say about investing in yourself, that's the sort of thing you have to do. As Ben said, social media is a very important thing. I'm not much of a tweeter, I'm more of a Facebook user, but I've got a Facebook page set up so that whenever I post anything on my Facebook page, it automatically gets tweeted. So I kind of still use Twitter as well, I just don't feed to it directly. I think it is important to interact with your audience. The main problem with Facebook, though, is they have started putting certain measures in place so that less and less people see your posts. I've got over 900 followers on my Facebook page, but almost every time I post a status on there, it will say about 64 people see it, which is a terrible percentage. Because Facebook want you to advertise, because they want you to invest in adverts with them for people to see your posts. Now, if you could turn those adverts into direct Amazon links to your book, you may find it's worth investing a little bit in that to see if that helps. I've done a little bit of that myself, and I have seen a little bit of return from it. Nothing amazing, but you do sometimes get a little bit of a kick. Sometimes if you spend a little money on advertising and it pays for itself, then again, at least that's more people reading your material. That's another larger potential audience for your other books. Another thing I would strongly advocate as well is actually doing price promotions around the time when you release a new book. If you've got a second book in a series coming out, reduce the first one right down to say 99 pence, or even do it for free. Because Amazon said before, they don't like the idea of people doing things for free, but they can't argue with the sales figures. When people can get a book for free, they buy the first one. The best time to sell a book is when people have just read one. So people will download the free one at the promo time, absolutely love it, and then they'll buy the second one at full price. So again, your sales will just skyrocket just purely off of that alone. I am actually a Nielsen registered author. Whether I needed to do that or not is debatable. I bought ISBNs through them. I use their ISBNs on my books. Whether I needed to or not, again, is completely debatable. Ebooks, you don't strictly need ISBNs. Certain websites such as Smashwords will actually allocate you ISBNs for free, but they will then list themselves as the publisher of the book for purposes of that. I don't think you need it as much on ebooks as you do in paperbacks, but if you do paperbacks, if you do POD, print on demand, through websites like CreateSpace, they will also issue free ISBN. So there's not strictly any need to buy your own ISBNs, it just depends on your own personal preference, really. One other thing I would say also is be wary of paying for reviews. I've seen a lot of websites that do actually charge people for reviews, to post you 5-star reviews, and people get very wary. If people look on an Amazon page and see nothing but 5-star reviews, they often think, this is friends or family, or these are people that paid for reviews. It's not always the case. One of the other people that's here today actually is David, over there behind you. One of his books, 6 Million Accusers, has got nothing but 5-star reviews, and that's just from genuine people that have read and enjoyed the book. So sometimes it does happen. But I think people in general are aware if they go onto a website and they see 55-star reviews, they're going to get suspicious straight away. So actually, when Ben was saying about negative reviews, not taking them to heart, negative reviews can actually be a very good thing, because it shows that real, genuine people have read the book, and whether they liked it or not, that actually can then result in more sales. Sounds paradoxical, but believe it or not, it does work. The main thing to know about marketing, full stop, is the success of any book. It's lightning in a bottle. No one's figured out how to do it yet. No one's worked out. There's no formula to it. Sometimes books just go viral. They just take off. Sometimes they just don't sell. Sometimes, when I went to the book fair last year, Joanna Penn was saying that most authors she knows who earn a living through writing have got at least 4 books out. So sometimes you have to wait until you've got 3 or 4 books out before you start to see a little bit of extra revenue coming in. You just have to be persistent. If you love writing, you just have to carry on writing. But it is difficult being indie when really you haven't got to just write the book now. You've got to sell it as well. And it can be very difficult to do. And I think, again, that's where people like Ben come in who can help advise people. I have been talking to Ben myself about how to help, with my own publicity, because I'm not really a salesman. I just like to sit behind a computer all day and write, but unfortunately it's very few books that are released that way that then succeed. It's just about selling yourself, pushing as hard as you can, trying to get it out there. And again, just don't take anything to heart if anything goes wrong. Like Ben said, a lot of these people are busy. It's usually nothing personal if they turn you down. It's just that they're so swamped with other work, etc., that they look at things very quickly, move on. And again, like Ben said, you need to do the same. Don't take it to heart, just move straight on to the next thing. That didn't work out, not to try that particular avenue next time. Perhaps keep a list of things work and things that don't work. So as you release more books down the line, again, you know where to target your efforts.
Aid mentioned NetGalley, and just to tell you what that is, because you probably don't know. It's a website that I think was originally created to solve the problem of how you get ebooks to reviewers. So physical books you can post to a reviewer, but ebooks you can't do that. NetGalley, you basically upload your ebook, and then reviewers are invited to download it and read it. Those reviewers are mostly bloggers or enthusiastic readers, people who will post reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or their own blogs, as opposed to reviewers from the New York Times or some places like that, although sometimes that does happen. But it's mostly real people reviewers as opposed to journalist reviewers.
Just want to add to what you said. One of the people you put me in contact with, people have, they say their name, right? Mary Smith, and 2 or 3 word thing who they are. Professional reviewer, or whatever. And the person said publisher of historical novels, which is what I write. I contacted them, and since then been happy and smiling. I published 4 of my novels in America, which have been selling very well, and she wants more. So, you never know where things go.
Exactly, and it's
the other thing is, don't give up your day job.
Don't give up your day job, but say yes to as much as you can. Get out there as much as you possibly can and do as much as you possibly can, because you don't know what's going to trigger something else. Little things can lead to big things. Things can snowball. The things that we consider, massive hits now, Harry Potter, 50 Shades of Grey, started as little books that, for whatever reason, whether it's awards or notoriety or whatever, became big things. So the more you're out there, the more you're doing things, the more you're trying things, the more success you'll have.
Yeah, it's important to be active rather than inactive, because the only thing you can guarantee by being inactive is nothing will happen. If you're active, at least you've tried something. Really, and that's the main thing, and you're not going to get anywhere unless you put yourself out there and put the effort in. Really, and that's what you've got to do. So, any questions? Anyone really? So, my name. My surname Hawkins.
What situation are you in? I mean, do some of you have books out already? Are you writing books now? Trying to decide whether to, self-publish or.
I was dismayed when you said World War II books aren't selling. Because that's what I'm writing.
Well, it's actually not the case. I mean, it's with with the publicity campaign we ran, the book, the Korean War book sold very well. These things are sort of nuggets of information that publishers and other people take in and just assume that's the truth. It's a universal truth. And in fact, none of these things are universal truths. I had a publisher who wouldn't publish books with green covers because green covers don't sell. Well, you see green covers all the time for best-selling books. It's just, these things people take in as sort of gospel. We all do it to some degree, but take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's worth noting that no one in the industry really knows anything in terms of what's going to sell and what's not. And like Ben said, Harry Potter, 50 Shades of Grey, who know they're going to take off? There's always an audience for World War II books. There's a friend of mine who's a massive World War II enthusiast and will just drink up anything he can get his hands on, really. Some of it can be around the timing and things like that. I mean, obviously, there's not really any anniversary really in World War II. Take a major run at the moment. Obviously, we just had the 100 years for World War I. But nevertheless, I think for the type of books you write, there's always going to be an audience out there. Have you actually published yet? Or are you thinking of self-publishing?
I've just retired and I'm actually writing my first one.
Yeah, so I'd say probably your best thing is probably to try self-publishing and just, again, see where you go from there. Because the advent of Kindle and things like that have made it so easy now. I mean, obviously make sure you get the book proofed and edited to the best degree, because again, it's something I was saying in the earlier talk, one of the problems often with a lot of books, indie books that people then just release, is they're just riddled with typos, just so many different mistakes. So just make sure you get it to a nice professional standard. See if you can get a bit of critiquing on it if you're unsure, but always remember it's your book, you're the one who's got to be happy with it. And then self-publish on Amazon. It's so easy nowadays. You can use a program, the piece of writing software that I actually advocate is Scrivener. Best software I've ever used. I've used so many different programs over the years, that's the best one by far. You can go onto Amazon's website, download Kindle Gen to use with that. You can just export straight to a Mobi format, use your Amazon account, just sign in, and you can just upload your file, get your cover done. If you can, invest in a good cover artist, get someone to design
Cover's
a
really
nice cover
important.
for you. Yeah.
Don't leave that to the last minute. Don't make it an afterthought. It's
Yeah,
probably,
put a lot of
it's
thought
really
into your
important.
cover. Your blurb as well, try to get the best blurb that you can. I'm still not 100% sure if mine's as good as it could be on the back of my book. I mean, I've drafted it a few times, but even other people that have read the book that I've asked have had the same problem. It's a very difficult book to summarise in just a few paragraphs, so it's very, very tricky. But once you've got that, once you're happy with it, just self-publish it and just see where it goes. Start putting your self out there. Try doing a few adverts or something like that. Try find a few websites that do reviews and things like that. You can Google most things, and you never know where it's going to go. It's definitely worth giving it a try. But just don't. If publishers tell you they're not publishing World War II or World War II doesn't sell, just don't listen to them. Because one of the other things I mentioned in the earlier talk as well is the main thing publishers are a little bit scared of at the moment is the advent of Kindle means that authors no longer need publishers. We've got the power now. They need authors, but we don't need them. So that's kind of the thing. And one of the things I learned from the London Book Fair as well is publishers are getting very, very wary now. The big publishers, they don't like to publish anything unless it's already selling. By which point, if you're already selling books, do you need a traditional publisher? That's a big problem, isn't it? So, 50 Shades of Grey started selling really well on its own. I don't know the story with that, whether it started selling well as an indie book or whether it then got picked up by a publisher or what. But again, if you're selling 100,000 copies a month, for example, and your book goes viral, no publisher is going to be able to beat that.
Any questions?
As you say, everybody's so busy these days, but do you still advocate calling them rather than a follow-up email, for example?
Emails can just be ignored. It's important to phone people. And that's, make them say no directly to you. It's not as easy.
Yeah, it's more personal.
Just to follow that one up, I sent a manuscript to a publisher at the London Book Fair this year. They had a special deal, Jonathan Cage. They would take unagented books. Send your first 50 pages. I sent the first 50 pages in June, as I asked for. Didn't get any reply. Waited 6 weeks, sent an email, haven't heard since. So the next stage should pick up the phone. You think, I'm asking, should the next stage be for me to pick up the phone? But there's a problem, I don't know who to speak to. Just to say, can I speak to the commissioning editor? It's also pretty vague.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, you may as well pick up the phone and give them a call. But I wouldn't wait any longer.
Yeah, but who? If I haven't got a specific name.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you asked to talk to the commissioning editor. The receptionist might not put you through to somebody. They might just give you an email address to call or something like that. You might not get through to a real person.
In other words, be a persistent pain in the wherever.
Yeah, I mean, try as much as you can, but if you're publishing through a traditional publisher, you send the material off to them. It'll take them months to get back to you. Then if they like it, it'll go through various committees and things. It'll take months more. And then if they actually want to publish it, they're going to publish it a year and a half after that. So you're not going to see a book for quite a long time. And I've worked with publishers and I work with self-publishers. I'm not pro or against either of them. It's just if you want your book out, soon, it won't happen soon. It won't happen quickly with a traditional publisher. It'll take years. So I wouldn't wait too long. Be as much of a pest as you can, and then move on. If you don't hear anything. Anything else?
Any more questions?
Yeah.
You mentioned covers being very important, and we've just brought our first novels out between us, just on ebooks. But we had problems mostly with the covers.
Yeah.
Like we had one of my friends did because he was a graphic designer, but we did the other cover. But someone else was an artist and contacted to do the cover, and then we spent like a month waiting for them to do it, and then we contacted them to say, can you let us know where you are with it, and then there was no reply.
Yeah.
And then they never got back, and it held things up. Are there any sort of standards that you can suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I would say go. They're professional cover designers, people who do this all the time, and know what things to put where on a cover, know what sort of images you want to use for a particular kind of book. Really go for somebody who does that job. Even big publishers have a cover designer, somebody who only does covers. It is so important to get your cover right. I know you just changed your cover. So many people don't get it right first time because, it's tempting to go for, somebody who's an illustrator or, somebody who's not very expensive and kind of has the right, you like or something like that. Often it's the case that somebody who doesn't know anything about you or anything about your book can actually pinpoint it better than somebody who's close to you. So I would say always try to go for a professional. Just like editing, you need really somebody who can give you a dispassionate, honest view of your book.
Another good thing to try as well is if your book is in a particular genre, look at other books in that genre by some of the big publishers just to get an example of what they look like and kind of use that as a rough template and then do your own variation on it or something like that, just to get an idea of what sort of fonts to use. I mean, you can Google what kind of fonts to use on book covers because some of the big publishers like to use very specific fonts. They only choose from about 5 different typefaces, ones that are very bold and stand out very well on the cover. And obviously you've got to look at the contrast between the text and the image and how clearly the title stands out, how well the cover represents the contents of the book. Because like Ben said, I just redid my cover. My first version of my cover I actually designed myself. I had quite a lot of positive feedback for it, but I wasn't completely sure if perhaps the cover was holding it back a little bit. And I asked Ben and he said no, he didn't feel it completely represented the contents of the book, and I think that's what I needed to hear. I kind of already knew it, but I needed someone else to say it before I acknowledged that there were problems with the cover. I then commissioned an artist to actually draw the cover for me. I gave him the ideas, we had a bit of a back and forth between us until we settled on the final design, and then I used a Facebook writing group that I'm a member of, put an image of the blank cover on there and started asking people about, what do they think about typeface and colours and things like that. I did so many different versions. I just kept posting new version after new version until basically the majority of people agreed that they felt the image was nice, it was striking, it was clean, it was easy to see the title stood out, my name as an author stands out, the blurb on the back stands out, nice and clear and easy to read. And that's sometimes what you need. You just need a bit of that feedback just to know if you're doing something right. I mean, I did a few variations on text that looked fantastic on their own, but as soon as you put them on the cover, they just disappeared into the image. And someone said to me, well, why don't you make the text white? And I did, and that was it. That was all I needed to do, was just make text white, and it just suddenly just stood off the page, just jumped off the cover.
There are a lot of groups of writers out there, and if you're not a member of a group in some way, it's really valuable to be to join a group, because it's that sort of feedback that you get. People who have tried other things in the past, people who have shared experiences. There's a group called the Alliance of Independent Authors that I always recommend to people, because the amount of information that goes through that organization, amongst the thousands of people, who have tried everything amongst them, it's amazing. So they're well worth getting in touch with. But there are other groups, of indie authors out there as well.
Yeah.
But that sort of feedback is invaluable.
Yeah, a group I use on Facebook is a group called Fiction Writers Group, and I do actually recommend giving them a try, because I was a member of one writing group on Facebook for a while, and actually left that after only a few months, because I released my first book, and just the amount of petty bitterness, the bullying, just people were happy to push you over and then kick you while you're down, basically. But once I joined Fiction Writers Group, it's actually, the admins are absolutely fantastic. They don't take bullying, they don't take harassment, no self-promotion, it's all about self-improvement. You can interact with people on there one-to-one, you can get feedback from different people, you can do a bit of, I'll critique your work, you critique mine. Sometimes that's just what you need, just to help kind of develop and find that story. Because when I did my first novel, it took me 10 drafts to figure out what it was, and without feedback it wouldn't be anywhere near as good as it ended up being. People just kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me, and then once you kind of get your mindset wrapped around that, you begin to critique your own work better. You begin to know what's good and what's not working, and you begin to edit your own work better. So it's just always about self-improvement. And as I said earlier as well, there can be no ego in writing whatsoever, because as soon as you let your ego get the better of you, you get complacent, you make mistakes. You've always got to be open to suggestions. If someone comes to you with feedback, listen to the feedback. They may or may not be right, but always listen to it, look at it objectively, and then decide for yourself whether you think they're right or wrong, whether you need to change something. And like I was saying with Ben in the cover, sometimes you already know what the problem is, you just need someone else to say it.
I may just have missed it, sorry if you've already said it. but I was wondering whether you also brought your book out in print or just as an ebook, and if there was a difference.
Yeah, I initially released it on Kindle format because for me, because of the rise of Kindle, because there's no upfront costs involved in releasing it, that was what I went for initially. But then there's still a lot of people out there that prefer to read print. So I used CreateSpace to do my print-on-demand version because there's no setup costs involved. There's no investment whatsoever. The only thing you do need to do if you're going to do that is, again, make sure you get a good cover image. I mean, you don't want to do the same thing with an ebook, really. Whenever I commission a cover, like I did for my new one, I got the artist to do me a wraparound cover for the paperback, and then I just cropped it for the ebook version, basically, and then just adjusted the positioning of the titles and things, because ebook covers are actually slightly wider than paperback covers. So again, you just reposition things and all that. But yeah, primarily I went for the ebook audience, because that's where the vast majority of sales come from. There is a huge price difference involved, and one of the big gripes people have with Kindle and Amazon is books from the big publishers. You tend to pay about the same price for the Kindle version as you do for the print edition, whereas you shouldn't have to. So for me, the only thing that I didn't like was my paperback through Amazon is priced at $8.99 because I could not push it any lower, just because the sheer printing costs are so high. But I'm able to release the print version for just basically $1.99. So you can sell the Kindle edition a lot cheaper, which hopefully help encourage digital sales, because again, that's where the vast majority of sales will come from. Yes?
How much could you pay up front for editing, for a cover? How much would you invest in one book?
It can be very tricky. Prices do vary quite a lot. Editing can be quite expensive. I know one writer a few years ago, he kind of made a lot of mistakes, and I think he ended up investing well over $1,000 just in editing. I'm quite lucky. I can self-edit to quite a high degree, but then I passed off the second edition of my book to an actual editor to have a look at, and she was going to charge me $100, which was extremely reasonable. You won't see many offers like that. And she read through the entire book. It was 113,000 words, and she only found about 4 typos, and she only made one edit suggestion. Because the book was so polished, she only actually charged me $50 in the end. Cover design is quite different. Again, cover writers vary. Some will charge between sort of $300 and $500. So again, you're looking at what the current exchange rate is. Best place to find cover artists is actually usually DeviantArt. You look on there, you can find, if you sort of search for this kind of images you want to find, you can find some things through there. I very nearly had an artist who I found on DeviantArt, but he wasn't interested in doing my cover because he was more into typical high fantasy. So he wasn't that interested in what my book was about. But I was quite lucky. I'd seen a cover by a book by an author called Carol March. She'd released a book called The Unseen Promise, and I loved the cover art. So I looked inside and saw who the cover artist was, and I contacted him and commissioned him to do my cover for my new book. And he agreed to do that for $300, which is obviously a lot cheaper. But in terms of setup costs, you could be looking at around, I would say in terms of British pounds, probably between 300 and 500 to really invest in it. You can do it cheaper, you can do it for less, but I would advocate spending a little bit on it. If you are serious about it, put a little bit of money, invest into it, because again, you might not necessarily see a return on that book, but if you keep up that and keep doing the next books, by the time you get to say 3 or 4 books out, you then might begin to see the investment come back. And if you've already got professional cover art, people are going to respond to that a lot better. Your sales are more likely to then push up. Okay. Anything else?
Did we talk about editing? Did we talk much about editing?
A little bit. What was your specific question?
Because you say that you can self-edit quite effectively, but is that something that you have to invest in, having it?
You have to be quite disciplined. You have to be able to look at your own work very objectively. The important thing about editing is not to be precious about your own work. Not every word you write will end up in the book. My first book, the final version, ended up being about 113,000 words. I probably wrote over 300, 400,000 words in the process of doing that, probably more than that, and loads ended up getting completely cut out. You write something, I might write a scene 3 or 4 times before I settle on a version that I'm happy with. In the first edition of my book, before I published, I had one scene quite late in the book that was about 1,500 words, and I replaced it with 2 paragraphs because it was just slowing the story down, it was repeating, it wasn't adding information. The important thing is when you read your own book back, if you want to try and self-edit to a certain extent, sometimes the best thing to do is to put it away for a few months, so that when you take it out and look at it again, you're looking at it completely fresh. Work on something else in the meantime, look at it fresh, look at it objectively, and say, this works, this doesn't work, etc. Is this scene adding anything to the story? Is it adding anything to character? If it's not, just get rid of it.
Yeah, because just occurs to me that maybe a lot of people would need to pay for someone else to edit?
Yeah. It usually is best to try and find someone to invest a little bit.
I think very few people can really edit their own books that to the degree that they need to, and I would say anybody at the very least needs to have somebody, you know, check they've dotted their I's and cross their T's. You know, the copy editing has to be done, because any mistakes will get picked up on. You just read reviews all the time. Oh, there was a mistake on page 7. There was a mistake on page 29. So, you know, all those have to be caught, and so you need a really good editor to do that.
Yeah,
is it a big investment, paying?
It can be. It depends. I mean, I was quite lucky because I had so few errors in mine. The person who edited only charged me $50 for the process, but I have seen some people will charge $200, $300 for the process of proofreading. I mean, if you're lucky, if you've got a friend or a partner or someone who can look over it for you first, that may help reduce the cost to you in getting it proofread, because you've had someone else go over it to help you remove as many mistakes. They might find continuity errors for you and things like that. I'm quite lucky. My wife is incredibly supportive. She actually looked over my book and found an inconsistency that I'd completely missed when looking through it, so helped me pick up on that before I went to print. I've just finished reading a book by another indie author, and his was not only full of continuity mistakes and sort of plot problems, he'd misspelled the word lightning as lightening about 6 times out of 10 throughout the entire book. And things like ascent he'd spelt wrong as well, where he meant ascent as in, ascending. He'd spelled it double S at the beginning, so as in to agree. So unfortunately there are things like that. Sometimes you'll be sitting typing away. I've done it myself before as well. You'll type a word and I typed something like, you're always right, and I realised I just spelled right, W-I-R-T-E, and I was just like, I can't believe I just did that. When I proofed my second edition of my book, when I was reading through it, I realised that I'd only used the word, I think it was brought, throughout the entire book. I hadn't used the word bought. And the embarrassing thing was, I know the difference between bought and brought, yet somehow every single time I'd spelled it wrong. So I had to search for every instance of the word and correct every single one throughout the entire document. It's a bit of a time-consuming process, but sometimes you realise you've just made these very simple mistakes and you just need to go back and correct.
We all have these things. Whenever I type definitely, I always type it as defiantly. I don't know, it's just the way my fingers hit the keys. And it doesn't get picked up, obviously.
The best one I wrote, writing a novel about Shakespeare, in an introduction, I wrote about speculative knowledge of Shakespeare, because we know virtually very little about him personally. And I wrote, in Shakespeare's autobiography, instead of biography. Had he written an autobiography, it would have saved a hell of a lot of problems. But it just looks so natural on the page. Shakespeare autobiography.
Yeah, I have certain words that never come out right as well. Sometimes when I type destroy, it always comes out destroy, and I'm like, why every time?
You had a question?
Do you have any experience on scams, or what to look
There
out
are
for?
certain ones. The main ones to avoid are the ones that try to charge you up front for printing your book. Ones that will ask you to pay, say, $1,000, $1,500, something like that, and they will print so many copies of your book, etc. Don't do that.
Do your research. Look at if you do a Google search on anybody, if they're scammers, you'll see.
There's a very good site, the Independent Publishers something, and he reviews all sorts of people, scales them if they're crooks, yes or no. And I'm being less than polite. And a lot of these people, you pay up front. As soon as you pay them, they've made their profit. And they're not going to work on your book.
they've got no incentive to
And they're telling you the world will beat the path to your door. Forget it, the world won't beat anything. They've made their profit, and that's the end of the story.
The ones I recommend are Matador and Silverwood. They're both companies that will give some attention to your book and want it to do well. And you like GMTA, GMTA. So I've never had personal experience with them, but Matador and Silverwood always produce really good quality books, and they're a pleasure to do publicity campaigns for, because we know that the spelling mistakes aren't going to be there, and that's good.
I think as well, if you're wary about scams, try joining a Facebook group like Fiction Writers Group. We've got over 5,000 members in the group. Odds are that everyone in that group at some point is going to have encountered one of these scams. So if you're ever unsure about something, you can put on there, has anyone ever heard of such and such a service? Do you know about this? I see posts like that all the time in the group, and people just chip in. They talk about their own experience. Some people said, "Oh yeah, I've used this, it's great," and other people say, "No, don't use this, it's a scam." So if you're ever wary about anything, just go online and just ask, and there will be people out there that know that will steer you away from anything like that.
But they are out there, do your research.
Yes.
Do you use Scrivener to do the final layout of your book?
I use Scrivener for very much the whole process, if I'm honest, because I found it to be the most simple. Because of the way Scrivener is laid out, you can move scenes around, you can move scenes between chapters and things very easily. It's a very nice piece of software in the way it's laid out. It can actually do more complicated things as well, and I've actually found their customer service has been brilliant. At one point I was toying with the idea of numbering the pages in Roman numerals instead of normal numerics, and they told me, just go into the page editor and just put in this little bit of thing, and then when you compile it, all your page numbers will come out in Roman numerals. They're just a fantastic piece of software. It's almost like the Photoshop of book world, if you know what I mean. It's like deceptively simple, but you can just do so much with it. You can export to virtually every format under the sun. You can do PDFs from it, Mobi, doc formats and everything. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And the best thing about them as well is they've actually, on their website, they do a 30-day non-consecutive trial. So you can actually try, it's fully functional for 30 days, you can actually save and everything. So you actually get to see whether you're going to get on with the software before you use it or not. They're constantly updating it, they're constantly adding new features and quashing bugs. And the main thing that worked for me, the main reason I wanted that program, was you can actually move files between PC and Mac, and they'll work on both formats with no problems, which is a massive benefit for me because I use a cheap PC laptop, Windows laptop, for writing on breaks at work, and then I copy it over to my Mac when I get home.
Attention please, the whole library will be closing in 25 minutes. Please be aware all public computer terminals and electrical equipment will be switched off at 7:50 p.m. Thank you.
Guess we better wrap this up, mate.
Yeah, they told us that was their cue.
Yeah, I do have Scrivener, I just haven't used it that much. I did actually purchase it because I knew you could lay your book out and then format it to ebook.
Yeah, you can do it almost like virtual 3x5 cards. When I actually map out the plots for my novels, what I do is take different coloured 3x5 cards and I map out the plot line for each character arc on different coloured cards, and then I kind of lay them out in what I think is the logical format of events, and then I pin them to a corkboard. That's my process. Scrivener is very much like that in terms that you've basically got all them. You can flag things, you can mark them in different ways, you can put notes on them and things like that, and then you can just move them around to where you think they're going to need to be. When I did the second edition of Falling, I actually found that I'd taken one story element and spread it across two scenes in two different chapters in the book, and I actually found that it was better to put it all into one because the way Scrivener is done, where you can search through documents and it will just highlight the ones that have got instances of those words, etc. I could then just take that out, move it in, edit. It was a very simple process. I know a lot of people strictly stick to just using Word, and I can't imagine trying to write the book I'm working on at the moment is about 300,000 words. I can't imagine trying to write something that long in a Word document because you've got to physically scroll up and down the entire thing. Whereas with Scrivener, you just click on the specific scene. It just gives you that scene alone. You haven't got to worry about the rest.
Breaking my Word document into chapters because I need to be able to write on my iPad, and you can't write.
That is the only disadvantage. Yeah, I have contacted them about whether they're doing that, and I'm not sure if that's one of the things they're hoping to do.
2 years ago they were, and they haven't.
No. The best thing I would say is I use Pages on my iPad. I would say use Pages on your iPad because you can sync your documents through iCloud, and then say if you use a Mac for your main writing, you go on there, bring up your document through iCloud, and then you can just import your Pages text straight into Scrivener and just sort of streamline the process. But technology is a wonderful thing. It does streamline the whole process. I mean, I absolutely love iCloud. If I'm sitting in bed and I've just woken up in the morning or whatever, I've suddenly had an idea for a story, fantastic dream, I'll grab my phone, type it in Pages straight away, put it, let it sync, put it down, and then when I go on my Mac later, I can just bring the document up, and then you can just import it over. It's like a virtual notebook. Really, because I always sort of say to myself, I try to keep my notebook handy, but my handwriting is atrocious and I often can't read my own handwriting back afterwards. And the worst thing is, I find sometimes I'll make a note for myself and I'll attempt to read it back later and it'll be written so shorthand or I've only written like one sentence and I've completely forgotten the context of that sentence, and I sort of sit there and go, what the hell was I thinking? So yeah, try if you leave yourself notes, make them as detailed as possible.
Yeah, will do.
I think we're going to have to wrap that up now, but thank you very much for your questions and thank you very much for coming.